So here on the Mosaic Arc, we are not shy about taking on the questions that rile the internet. We've talked about Empire, we've talked about pirates, we've talked about Barbie and Dune, but this one, of all of the topics that I've announced in our journey through the oceans of the internet, nothing gets people more riled up than the differences between men and women. And tonight we have an argument that started between us over exactly what kind of differences there are between women and Casey's laughing in the background. Women and men spiritually. So I'm sure it's like everybody. I'm grouchy. I've got a cold. I've got a stomach ache. I didn't get to fencing practice last night. On guard. Oh, sorry. I have
I
a
think you're
sword.
McGregor.
I'm going to. I may be. I may be. Actually, we're Campbells. I'll have you know. So we run out of Scotland for other reasons.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Well, you
we have
know
a
that
we have a
that
Campbell in the whatever.
that article Mel was posting, that excerpts from the book she was reading, said that the McGregors took the name Campbell. That's one of the names they took.
Well then,
When their name
well
became
then,
illegal
and
because they were too fighty.
I come by my Scots Irish feistiness honestly. You see.
Oh,
Anyway, you had this opinion.
I had this opinion. Yes, girls rule, boys drool. Thank
Oh,
you. Good night.
okay. Good night. Yes. Uh, so everyone who is, riveted by our ongoing discussion of the discarded image, we needed a break. We're doing a lot of reading in medieval science and alchemy and making sure that we understand the heavens and the soul and things. But this one we should have an easier time at because we'll just, I don't know, two ladies disagreeing about what men are like. What could possibly go wrong?
Or what women are like, right?
Or
A little
maybe,
bit of
I don't
both.
know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Okay, so I don't even remember how it came up in the midst of our talking about what were we talking about last week?
I'm trying to
Um,
remember.
Saving the appearances still, right? And something scientific and clearly under pressure of mathematics.
This is an inside joke. I'm math and me. We're not buds. We never have been.
Mathematics is beautiful. I need I so I
I'm
you know
sure it is. We understand
I
it.
need to understand more about medieval mathematics, and I'm sort of warming up to this right now, but mathematics is exquisite and cosmic. And I don't know why this triggered you to say something about how women are more spiritual than men.
Guess it doesn't require equations. Maybe I don't know.
Okay.
No,
So you
we
had
should. So we are in the presence, everyone, of the rare female, in my opinion, Rachel Holton Brown, who uses both sides of her brain because she can understand higher mathematics and physics and also poetry and language and history and philosophy. And I am more of that type to be able to understand that, which is why I can have conversations with her. But if this were about math every week, no, wouldn't be me here. I would add nothing.
so no, the thing is I just have girl level good at math, right? I have my dad. Oh, my dad. He was a well, he was a heart surgeon. So there you go. Alpha cred. Um,
Yeah.
and he did have his pilot's license, although he couldn't go in the Air Force because his eyesight wasn't good enough. But he could fly small
Mm.
planes, and didn't slam us into the mountain outside Lander, Wyoming, when we were flying in a oh my gosh.
Wow, he
Yeah.
flew you. That's
He
okay.
no,
Your dad was a badass.
my dad was a badass, right? And the thing is, he didn't
Cool.
actually want to be a surgeon. He only became a doctor because he liked my mom.
Aw,
And
what a
I guess he was
softie.
a softie, and then he left her for another doctor. I mean, like, there's a little bit of a story here. I may
Yeah.
have some ideas about men and women, but he loved mathematics, right? He
Mm.
absolutely loved mathematics, and in the latter part of his career was actually doing some very interesting mathematical modeling of infection
Ooh, interesting.
this he's a trauma surgeon as well as a heart surgeon, so he's interested in predictive models for recovery, and like
Makes
at
sense.
what point you could definitely say someone was going to pull out and at what not, and some of this
Mhm.
had to do with bacterial colonies and being able to graft that, and so he spent the last decade of his life at least complaining that he couldn't find mathematicians that could talk to him about biology. Or vice
I can
versa,
understand
right? The
that. Yeah.
doctors, trust me, doctors is as far as my dad was concerned, doctors have zero capacity to it's like all of the stuff that we've been hearing about, the medical stuff that, all these statistics and everything, according to my dad, medical profession is weak on the mathematical modeling of things.
Well,
You've
it
heard
sounds
it
like your
here. So
yeah. It sounds like your dad had varied interests outside of his specialty of just being a heart surgeon, because most people, I'm going to take a guess, would be just happy with that. But in my experience, having met quite a few people in the field of science, that they tend to specialize and they tend to get tunnel vision, and they won't look outside of their field very often or very deeply, and that's why you get problems like you have with doctors just automatically accepting that yes, vaccines cure everything. You just just make everybody take them. No, I don't know how we're getting
right.
off on the tangent, but
Well, no, it's a sort of like there masculine and feminine traits of knowledge and
well, yeah,
understanding, and just to say, you were describing me as I'm just describing myself as my father's daughter with a sword on the wall, right? But what's
yeah,
interesting is the degree to which, for example, we've been subjected for the last 20 strongly for the last decade, very much so for quite some time, including you're making the jokes about the McGregors, right? In what I was tweeting yesterday, more just a comparative image of the girl in Scotland with her knife and an image of Helen McGregor from Walter Scott's Rob Roy, right? And this sort of
mm,
image of the knife wielding woman.
yes,
We have it there in people were comparing her to Boudica and Joan of Arc and things like that. But as a Scottish character, it seemed to me Helen McGregor was right up there.
sure,
That the Scots Irish have this. I don't know whether it's a masculine woman. Helen McGregor in the picture is in a skirt, right? But
hmm,
sort of the warrior woman who's willing to defend her family
hmm,
character that Walter Scott, I don't know whether he invents it or just immortalizes it in that way. Um, but that we've been constantly being fed these images of masculine women or fighter women, girl boss women, and to say something like women are more spiritual than men, that could just end up feeling like, well, you're girl bossing everything now,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
I
I
know
wouldn't
you're
connect
not
it
doing
to,
that, but it's like
yeah,
the problem is, and this is where the sort of sober. I've got a book of examples that we're going to work through some of if as we go, but
hmm,
it's actually a real question. It's like, what are the differences between men and women? Because we've been like culturally schooling ourselves to insist that they're none, except for women are better. But no, they're just the same as men. But in
right.
fact, so to say something like women are more spiritual than men, I do wonder. What
Do you
you
wonder?
mean?
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about the masculine, badass woman image,
Mm,
because I was just watching Critical Drinker's review of Red Sonja, and it's hilarious. He always is.
he's
It's
great.
been a good
Yeah.
sorry. It's just, oh, I wish somebody would make a good one. I love Xena Warrior Princess because it's a fantasy, and I think I mentioned that before. I think this idea of a woman defending herself, it's real. We've all looked at this girl this week, and myself and a couple other people said, "Yeah, I've got stories like that."
Hmm.
Right? It's a real thing where it's like you against a group of guys, or one or two guys, and they want to hurt you. Um, so I think the image of this strong, warrior woman that keeps showing up, girl boss in fiction, is a way of the pendulum kind of swinging back, for women were kind of being dismissed and told, this is what feminism tells us, to be quiet. We're never quiet. We never listen. Right? So the pendulum swings back, and everybody wants to see the girl boss, in fiction. When it happens in real life, it's very dangerous. But it does happen. I just wanted to put that out there. So about the spiritual, it's the same thing where, what is the old saying? What does the old saying go? Well-behaved women rarely
History.
make
Well-behaved women,
history.
because, but the problem
Yeah.
is, I don't know whether I've been badly behaved or well behaved or whatever, right?
Yeah.
That's meant to be a challenge, but the problem is, even in the circumstances in which people use it, if you misbehave, they're still mad at you. So I mean, we're in so many layers here, and newcomers to the arc, because we know we've been going long enough now that we can have newcomers that don't know how much we've done in the past.
That's true.
And
Yeah,
there are
we've
all
done a
these
lot.
playlists out there, and we've got one on women and men. Um,
Yeah, you and Kills in particular did a lot that first year
we
about
did,
that. But
yeah, we've done a lot on this question because it keeps coming back up, right? And it's interesting that I mean, I would say it's a persistent theme in the Western tradition of what the difference between men and women are, because in
yeah,
fact, for the most of the Western tradition, I mean, certainly the Christian tradition, women have been expected to be spiritual in much the same way as men are, going back to the earliest monastic communities where we have desert fathers living in the caves in Egypt, but they're desert mothers too, right? That they're women
right.
who took up that life, that ascetic life in the early centuries as well. So, Christianity, it's interesting that for a large thing, I would say a large element of this equality problem that we get is because, in fact, Christians do expect women to have a strong spiritual understanding.
They do, but they also tend to think they should. Well, at least in traditional, a lot of traditional Christian communities expect women to be quiet, and we're not leaders in church. We're not priests. We're not pastors. That's kind of a new invention, unless you're a Quaker, because they actually did try to make inroads to make women, not at the very beginning, but eventually leaders. But it was expected that they would be quiet, that they would be silent, especially in church. And so
I
the
don't
idea
even know
that
where the idea of women being silent comes from, because I just can't see it that often in the Middle Ages, when some of the most like
well, that's
famous
yeah,
famous protesting voices are, oh, I don't know, Catherine of Siena, who
yeah,
fights the
yeah.
Pope.
She's loud, right? I think it comes from the Protestant tradition, though, more so than the Catholic tradition. But I mean, it has roots in this Catholic tradition that women aren't priests, so they don't speak in church. That didn't mean they didn't speak outside of it all the time. They did.
Well, technically, priests weren't preachers either until the High Middle Ages. Bishops were the only ones that were licensed to preach, precisely
Interesting.
because bishop. That's what I mean. This is the problem that in the early Middle Ages they have. They need enough bishops because bishops are the ones that are supposed to go around and preach. And the Carolingians under Charlemagne in the ninth century, eighth ninth century. But one of the things they do is compile collections of sermons so that in fact they have like authorized
Ah,
sermons.
right.
I mean,
Okay.
they're not so officially authorized just to be like stamped and stuff like that. But for example, Paul the Deacon's Familiary, they have these collections of sermons because you need some control over the preachers. I was just reading
Yes.
about
We could use some today, but that's another
Well, okay,
subject.
so
That's why I'm laughing.
I was just reading a book on called God's Philosophers. It's a nice sort of easy read history of medieval science. And he's talking about in the 13th century with the origins of the Inquisition, and they have to go around and talk to people and figure out whether or not they're actually heretics and so forth. That as soon as you have in the 12th and 13th centuries these towns with laymen well educated enough that they can read some scripture, and they start preaching and they start making all sorts of stuff up,
Oh, right.
right? Saying
Like
whether
what happens here.
saying that women couldn't preach, well, most men couldn't either, because you wanted to have some sort of oversight. I mean, bishops are literally overseers.
Yes.
Episcopus, right? It's the overseers. You wanted to have some oversight on what people were being taught,
Hmm.
right? So, and we know Hildegard of Bingen, for example, went on preaching tours. So all of these these things in the 12th century, right? She particularly preached against the heretics in the Rhineland, and had lots and lots of clergy writing to her for advice. So
Right.
it's the I don't know where the women should be silent and shut up kind of feeling.
But,
It feels very modern. It feels like one of those
well,
very modern literalist versions of things.
it's literalist version of St. Paul,
Right.
saying women need to be silent in church. They shouldn't be preaching in church.
Well, he
Um,
might have been
and,
they should be silent, like not gossiping and talking all the time or something.
silent or
Well,
literally
everybody. I
what's
mean, this is
anything.
the priests. The priests at Cantius have often, trying to keep the laity from chattering in the vestibule, so that it doesn't. Right. So
I'm going to get triggered. Yeah, I know.
right. So I think the sort of feeling of who gets to like create doctrine, who gets to you know claim to be speaking. Far as
Yeah.
I
So
know, the priests
yes,
are perfectly happy that my priests are perfectly happy that I do lectures. They were sharing
yeah.
my videos with each other.
But so to say women are more spiritual than men, I'm not talking about preachers, because you could be a preacher and not necessarily be very spiritual. Or
Okay. Well,
probably there
this
are
is
probably
good to this is
quite
good
a
to
few clericals that were treating it like I'm on the talking circuit. I they could have had that attitude. It doesn't necessarily mean that they were really spiritual people. They just spoke about spiritual things and were very good at it.
Well,
But
I think you need to clarify okay, but this is actually good
okay,
clarification that it's not okay, what are we putting in the rubric spiritual?
people who think frequently about the things of God don't necessarily speak about them, but they maybe they pray more like spontaneously in their head. They're more spiritual that way. That they see the world in that way, and we'll talk about it more freely than men will. Now, men may be praying just as much or not, but you wouldn't know it because they don't talk as much as women. So it's a different dynamic. Their relationship with God and the world and speaking to the world about God is different than the way a woman would do it.
So I accept different, and I think it's interesting what we were just saying. It's like women, we talk a lot. Like we are,
Yes,
I mean, maybe not me. I mean, once I get started, right, then I'm talking a lot, but
guilty.
I mean, it's well established and hopefully generously understood that women use speech differently from men. We can start at that level, right? That
Yes,
that that women use speech in socially different ways from men. I mean, the sort of cartoon version of it is, men going on a activity with their friends. Apparently fishing is the most popular sport in the United States. And famously,
yeah,
I mean,
you
guys,
have to be quiet.
they get on. I mean, you got your beers, I think, right? I don't know. I don't like fishing, right? And my dad did take us fishing a few times. It was, one of those disastrous non-events. We threw the fish eggs in the water because they bounced, and it was fun. Anyway, kind of,
and,
kind of,
and your dad could be heard muttering, "This is why you don't take girls fishing," right?
we kind of missed the point. But the guys, they'll sit in the boat and fish, and they don't, as far as I hear reports of, talk very much, right? The point is to
Yeah.
be there.
Wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Was my dad lying to me when he said you have to be quiet or you'll scare the fish away?
Yes.
What fish? Okay.
The fish don't care. I mean, it's like, I know he was trying to
Dad.
keep you quiet
Yeah,
because
probably.
men like sitting and listening to all of the other stuff, right? He wanted to hear the water and the wind and the, I don't know, maybe the fish talked to him and he couldn't hear them. But I have this experience with my brother who is I was sitting with him once on a porch in the mountains and looking out at the morning, right? I think it was the sunrise, right? And there was trees and the wind and maybe deer were going past every so often and such like that. And I had this terrible urge to want to talk,
Oh,
right? And he's the kind of guy we're gonna have to have him on the arc, right? He's the kind of guy that just likes sitting quietly, right? And so I
mhm.
knew that what he wanted to do on the porch was sit quietly, and I wanted to go no 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 no. Right?
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting there quietly thinking I don't want to say anything because he doesn't want to really talk. I'd like to talk. What do I talk about? And realizing that all of the things that I wanted to talk about weren't there.
Oh,
Right? It's like we were sitting there looking at the trees and the mountain and the air, the clouds and the sun and just there, right? We were just sitting there. And anything I wanted to bring up, so and so said this, what are we going to do tomorrow? Some abstract thing about history or something like that. Things like we talk about here, right?
yeah.
Wasn't in the moment, right? He just wanted to be there in that moment.
Why do you think that is? I mean, you're not the only one to do that. A lot of women do that. They want to fill the empty space with sound because it's less, maybe it's less isolating.
Well, yes, I mean, we talk a lot to create. It's like my other my opposite experience is with when I'm in the dog with the dog world, right? Means you go to the park and you talk to the people with their dogs, right? And there will be some women that they're in the park with the dogs and they'll just talk to be talking. I'm feeling myself now. We're just talking to be talking now, right? But they'll be narrating everything about the dog, about we need to do this, we need to, and I'm like, I can't even mimic it because I can't do
Hmm.
it, right? I cannot just talk to talk. I want to be talking about something. But as I realized with my brother, it's still women chatter, right? It's
Yeah.
still a kind of I wanted the social bond with him, so I wanted to talk, and he just wanted to sit there. So my guess is maybe guys when they're sitting in a boat together, just like sitting in the boat together, and they don't really, and it's wives would when the guys get home from their fishing, what did you guys talk about? Because we would have talked about something,
Right.
right? And they're
Yeah.
like, why would we talk?
Well, that's how they bond by doing things together. Women
Right.
bond by talking and doing things together and talking about what you're doing and what you're going to do and what you did
Mm-hmm.
yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge bonding thing. So women talk more, maybe, or at least talk about how they talk to God more, how they pray more. They would be more open about it. And men wouldn't because generally men don't talk as much as women do.
I think that's a first first thing to establish, right? It's like if we're judging the difference on the observable behavior, it's there, right? It's like saying women are more spiritual. Well, okay, women talk more, at least in your experience now. I mean, my prime example is, well, who writes more, the women or the men?
So yeah, and another thing that I don't think you can use as a benchmark is there's more women in church than men, at least in the Catholic Church. There's
Right,
always more women sitting in the pews than men, but that doesn't necessarily mean the men that aren't present in the church aren't spiritual, that they don't acknowledge God or pray or think about these things.
right. Well, so I do wonder. This is one of these problems of modernity, saying that the women, that the church. I read this book in college, which is still stuck with me, mainly as the title, like the feminization of blah blah blah, blah. And it was something like the 19th century culture of America. But the feminization of the church is very much a modern phenomenon, like that you make it domestic and feminine and mean, there's a movement among the men now to be fathers and bring your family to church, and that you're responsible for
Hmm.
being the father of the household and leading them in prayer and such. And that was definitely the mode prior to the 19th century. I mean, particularly among the Protestants, right? The father leads us in prayer kind of thing.
Mm.
So some of our sense of which whether religion is more feminine or not, it's a bit of a challenge. On the other hand, there is the problem that in the Catholic tradition, if you have men who are unmarried being the priests, they fall in this kind of ambiguous category, right? Because they're this is a problem in the Middle Ages too, because they keep getting the women pregnant. Uh,
Mm.
so particularly friars have a very bad reputation for this, because they're mobile from place to
Mm.
place, and they can come. And the women will talk to them. Women like talking to them because women like talking to the
Yeah.
men, and particularly if they're nice, handsome young men. Oh my goodness, and so yeah, I start wanting to make very careful sort of distinctions in our definition of what spirituality includes. But I mean, necessarily
Yeah.
talking about it, it's certainly part of how we understand what it means. But
Since, I mean, there have been so many men not showing up to mass in Catholic churches and I do think it's because of the changes over the last 60 years. I'm not even 60 years old yet, but I've been to a lot of different parishes because I moved around a lot in this country, and the parishes tend to do things that would appeal to women exclusively, like a lot of talk, a lot of action, a lot of singing, a lot of movement.
right,
Men don't like this. That's not
nope,
their spirituality. Their spirituality is direct, right? It's prayer. It's quiet. It's following leadership,
hmm,
which would be the priest. And I think that's why a lot of men aren't showing up. Now, obviously, if there are any bishops out there listening, this is catastrophic and something needs to be done about it in the mass. So I'm not going to say what, but talk amongst yourselves because that talk needs to be had.
you have just solved the problem. I mean,
Other people have.
there's a rude way of saying this. With has 4 words. Yes, 4 words. One of which you the third one, it starts with an F. Right? But shut up, right?
Oh, okay.
And this is what you just said. It's like so I this is what's good about, I mean, going to St. John Cantius, which you all, in our credits, you see the altar from St. John Cantius, but I don't have pictures of the clergy in our mosaic art credits, obviously. But it's all men. It's very it's very traditional. It's loads of, I mean, I'm not like balanced it out or counted it, but I feel like it's as many men as women in the congregation. And
Where you have those traditional masses
right,
and structures, you will attract young men. That's
you,
what they want.
they're there, right? And they
And
are
the young
there.
women want the men there.
Well, that too. I mean, the men of all ages, right? They're at
Hmm.
Cantius, and they're very, oh my, it's like I feel so I feel so female around them. Like I'm just like disruptive and chaotic, and let me say.
Disruptive and chaotic. Wow, that paints a picture.
It,
But yes,
it, it
that's,
is, and I'm
yeah.
not really doing anything, right? But they're so like intense, and
Mm.
they typically have their missals, of all ages, right? All of these guys. I wear a veil and stuff like that. I mean, the women at Cantius tend to carry our attention fairly carefully, but the men, oh my gosh, right? They're very, very focused and intense. And it was what you just
Hmm.
described. It's like they're not there to talk all the time. They're there to attend to God.
No, they're not there to express themselves. They're not there to perform,
Right.
off Broadway music type selections from the Missal,
There you go.
whatever that is. And for God's sake, get rid of the maracas, people. Seriously, I'm not even joking. I mean, that's not even the worst I've heard in a mass in America. By the way, there was a rain stick one Palm Sunday. Yeah.
Well,
Anyway,
so anyway, are we starting to understand why maybe we don't want women talking in church? I mean, maybe you just don't want them talking in church, right? Shh, shh, shh,
talking, singing, dancing,
just pay
seshing,
attention to
ordering people
God right
around.
now, right?
Yeah.
And indeed, I mean, this is I'd say it's so funny because I will how to put this. I will I actually I did put this properly in my lobster side comic, right? But that as a woman, I will see all of these things that I absolutely value about the men's spirituality, right? Which I think is what it is. It's their precision. I mean, their sort of mathematical beauty in the traditional mass, right? It's all very. I had a young man tell me that, right? And he's just saying it just feels so precise and beautiful. And I'm sitting there going,
Mhm.
but they're not barely doing anything. And it's like, it's like they're exactly in the right place at the right time in the right moment, and it's all very
Yeah.
um
It's very structured.
it's very structured. It's very not just reserved, but there's another word for it. Um I mean, it's formal and contained and all of these things. I can
Reverence.
see that and start wanting to have other things happening and know that I'd wreck it, right? It's like I can feel myself
Hmm.
resisting the beauty of it, even as I appreciate the beauty of it. And so I think it's like women, we will start redecorating no matter what. And
Right.
it's
And
almost
not for a good, not necessarily a good reason. It's just what we do
it's just what
everywhere
we
we go.
do. It's like birds making nests, right? It's like,
We're
oh,
nesting
we just
everywhere all the time.
nest. It's just nesting, right? And this is Rogue Wave saying, I think women actually have a biological inclination for talking, having to do with proper development and raising children, babies. Probably,
Possibly.
right?
Yeah.
We need to talk so the children learn how to talk, and so we talk in those nonsensical ways. It's repetitive. It's high
Yeah.
pitched because the
But we also talk to other women to help raise the kids and like treat them when they're sick. Like,
right,
have you ever seen this before? What's wrong with this child?
right,
Right.
yeah, all of this. So
Yeah.
it has its proper place, but it also is very disruptive in other contexts. And for example, when the men are sitting there fishing, they really want you to be quiet and don't scare the fish.
Dad.
The fish can't hear, all right? I don't think they can hear. Do they have ears? I mean, the otters and such do, but I'm not sure. I don't know if fish can hear. But I
Hmm.
don't think you were talking with scaring the fish away. I think you just wanted quiet, right? So that
Probably running around up and down the banks of the river and throwing rocks and maybe making loud noises. And
that would scare the fish away, throwing the rocks in the water. But
yeah.
the other part is, so these differences between if men, my example being St. John Cantius, or I mean another good example of this sort of ritual perfection is the guard at the tomb of the unknown soldier,
Mm,
which
right.
is uh, you know boring as all get out.
Well,
Oh my gosh, how would you even do that? But the men who serve there are, this is an incredible honor and a huge
yes.
responsibility, and they're going to do it absolutely perfectly in all sorts of weather. And there's always a guard there, and they're always having, never mind the tourists, trying to get the beefeaters or not the beefeaters, the horse guards. The beefeaters are the ones at Tower of London. That getting the horse guards to like blink or something, the ones that stand in front of Buckingham Palace,
Hmm.
that that the men who take these guard services are doing it with that level of precision that is I mean I think I mean the spirituality in that is enormous as I see it, but it's not verbal in the way that women eh, you know default to. A
Yes.
rogue wave says fish can't hear. Shh, no they can't. Okay, my husband is saying they can. You just want the women to be quiet. I don't want the fish to be quiet. My husband is making noise in the kitchen right now. Can you hear him? Anyway, yawn God, they feel the vibrations, the fish. Well, yeah, so
That's what I was
Casey, you're
thinking.
not supposed to be throwing rocks in the water. Um Rogue Wave. One of my liturgical pet peeves is when the Karen from the parish council announces at the beginning of the mass, "Welcome to such and such a parish." Blah 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 blah. Right, right. The women need to do that. It's chronic, right? And the thing is, as a woman who finds that irritating among other women, I will still do it.
Don't do that.
It's so hard not to. Right?
You're hurting the sisterhood
You're
here.
hurting the sisterhood. I don't know. It's pretty funny. Yeah, Rogue Wave is also saying, took my son camping and fishing over the weekend. We talked a little, but not very much, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
So this is, it's spirituality, Young God saying spirituality isn't a competition, or is it? Well, okay. So I think maybe we actually need some more precise examples here, right? To think about what's going on in people's heads. Because okay, the men aren't talking and the women are, and I think the men who like the silence and the focus and the, like my brother, just the present,
Yes.
whatever they're in the present, that they don't feel like the women are spiritual at all, right? We chatter all the time. We don't seem to pay attention. Your focus should be, I mean, it's like, just thinking about this, your focus should be on the altar, not like looking at what other people are doing or at the windows
Yeah.
or something like that. Even if you're completely quiet, right? But are you actually attending in the way that, I mean, the priests absolutely are. I love this in the traditional mass, and it seems to me the photos that they keep posting of the Pope with the elevation and things like that, it's like your
Oh, yeah.
attention needs to be on the presence, right? And
Yes.
here's our Lord here now. Don't look away. Right?
Which was the purpose behind the ringing of the bells at that moment,
right.
so that everybody could pay attention,
So
especially if they couldn't see, which they usually couldn't in the Middle Ages. I don't think they could see that part of the altar.
that's a whole nother question.
Yeah. I probably depended on the church, but yeah.
Yeah, in the later Middle Ages, it got, in the West, they liked having the rood screen to have and rood screen meant that the place where they have the crucifix on top. So
Yeah.
it was sort of a, that's another question. Anyway, so the attention is what is huge there, right? That you are in fact attending to the presence. But okay, granted that both the men and the women are bugging each other.
Yeah. In different ways. Yeah.
In different ways.
Why don't you ever shut up? Why don't you ever talk? Yeah.
See, we are here. We, the ladies of the Mosaic Ark, are here to let you guys know we get it. We're still going to talk.
Yeah, we do get it.
You can't turn us off. Sorry.
Yes, there's no off button.
No.
If you think this is bad, you should hear what's going on inside our heads all the time.
Okay, so this is in the question. It's like, if we're thinking of spirit, you say spirituality is what, right? And I think you did say it's like, focus on God or thinking about God. Is there a difference in our thinking about God?
The difference in our thinking, the way or what men think about God and what.
Yeah, and then this is okay. So then we end up with the actual, like, things people write down as our best evidence of it, since the men aren't talking. Yeah. We can't, guys. They'll never tell us. What do you think? Why? It's like every single cartoon ever. That isn't there's the meme of the couple lying in bed and the woman saying, "I bet he's thinking about such and such," and he's always thinking about something completely different from what she's imagining. So we're imagining stuff that the men are thinking. They just want us to shut up so they can carry on thinking.
Yeah.
To have some evidence about what people are thinking, the best thing we have is, I think, writing at the moment, right? Or maybe the podcast. It's like, guys, we're so happy to have you here because we know we have guys in our audience. There's way more guys out here on YouTube than there are ladies. The women who are on YouTube are talking to. We did we studied the stats, right? The women on YouTube are doing more fashion and beauty,
right,
for the most part. So again, not really explaining. The men are arguing theology and the women are talking about dresses. This doesn't give us a good indication, I think, in either direction of their private interior.
No, it would have to be a diary. It would have to be like saints who were ordered to write, write their, well, mystics I'm thinking of,
Right.
ordered to write down their thoughts by their confessors, not that they confess, but the thoughts that they've been having, and maybe visions sometimes,
Well,
because
look,
they
I've
thought
got
it
a
was
book.
valuable. As a matter of fact,
Casey's setting me up this time. That's good. So but when we plan to talk about this topic, I'm like, okay, so this, if we're just going anecdotally, there's certain limitations as we've just demonstrated. And what is interesting is this question of men and women's spirituality has been a huge, huge question in medieval studies for the last 40, 50 years, right? I mean, it interested when I was when I was an undergraduate, because women's studies was really getting off the ground. Gender in religiosity was an enormous question, and my dissertation advisor, Caroline Walker Bynum, was one of the most important women's voices in this argument, and she made her fame off of a book called Jesus as Mother.
I think I remember that
Right.
title.
Which I think she said one of
Yeah,
her friends told her, you need to title this as the book. And she's like, well, but there's other essays in the book. And he's like, no, 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 no. Go with Jesus as Mother.
say, trust me. Yeah.
Trust me on this. And what was interesting is that most of the people that she was talking about in her Jesus as Mother paper, the essay, were men, right? People like Anselm of Canterbury and Bernard of Clairvaux, who described Jesus in these maternal terms. So
Hmm.
the Jesus as Mother was not, as you might be hypothesizing, women talking about Jesus carrying maternal roles. It was men talking about Jesus. And look, my pictures are perfectly aligned here, with Jesus holding the instruments of the Passion, pointing to his side wound, and in this very interesting, like, twisty image, so that he's naked, but it's okay for
Modest.
modestly naked. But the side wound, famously by the later Middle Ages, becomes a quite pregnant image, because it's from his side that he gives birth to the church in the allegory,
Oh,
right? So
okay.
because from his, when he's dead, and Longinus sticks the spear in him, and blood and water come out, pleurisy in his lungs, apparently. So there's water in
Yeah.
his lungs. Blood and water comes out, and that is the image that's often used in the medieval iconography of his giving birth to the church. Right. This is the first of his blood pouring out. They have, often the church is holding a chalice so that it catches the blood. The
Hmm.
Grail, right? It's like this is the idea of the Grail image. So he is, but he's also a mother in ways that he cares for the souls, and he cares for his, the souls, and they're, and the men who are writing this, people like Bernard of Clairvaux, are talking about themselves, or they're talking about themselves as abbot needing to care for their
Yeah.
monastic sons, right? So we've been talking about this in the field, and Caroline started it, and then the next book she came out with was Holy Feast and Holy Fast: The Religious Significance of Food to Medieval
Hmm.
Women. And it was at this point that I became her. I'd already been reading some of her things a few years before this, but that book came out, and I went to be her graduate student, and was working on the Song of Songs, and the imagery in these commentaries on the Song of Songs, which was all written by men too. But
Yeah.
so we've had a lot of this gendered language. We've been having lots and lots of arguments about exactly what counts as female or male, masculine or feminine spirituality. Well, Caroline, having come out with Holy Feast and Holy Fast: The Religious Significance of Food to Medieval Women, was then attacked famously. This was in 1991. Caroline was there on the front lines before any of the cancel culture happened,
Hmm.
right? She was attacked by a woman, Kathleen Biddick, in an article in our flagship journal, Speculum, saying that she had essentialized the women that she was talking about in Holy Feast and Holy Fast. And by trying to say things like women took on Christ's humanity, whereas men took on his divinity, or that the women, embraced the fact that they were taking on this element of
She
Christ's.
claimed they were subordinated.
Well, no, just that she claimed there was such a thing as women. or
Audacious.
and the thing is, since then we've all been terrified because I mean, this is Kathleen was writing this about the woman who was the most senior person in our field at that time, who we were all wanting to study with, and we're quoting and all of it and saying that so that there were these complicated gendered images in medieval devotional literature, like the Jesus's mother, that maybe there were differences between the way women and men, and the Holy Feast and Holy Fast, the Caroline's, that it wasn't technically her second book, but anyway, the next book, Holy Feast and Holy Fast, was specifically about devotion to the Eucharist, right, and to the flesh, right, and this paying attention to the feast and the fast was the food imagery in the mass, and also with fasting and ascetic practices and such, but that Caroline came out with, oh yes, there were ways that women, as women, for example, and this fits with what you were saying earlier about women not being able to preach or speak, that in the later Middle Ages, there are a number of women who have very interesting visions during the Mass, including, and Caroline made a point in highlighting these, in situations where they had been in quarrels with their priests in some ways, and if the priest wouldn't give them Mass, Jesus would directly. Right?
Oh.
So we're
I spoke to the manager.
We're gonna right. Yes, we're gonna get around the problem some way, right? So this is okay. And then Kathleen came along and said, no, 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 no. There's no such thing as women's spirituality. That's essentializing women to assume that women all have the same, and you can generalize on the basis of women and men at all. And there was some other, my sometime colleague at University of Chicago, Amy Hollywood, also came out with a book that challenged what Caroline had said, and basically it all fell apart. Right, by the end of the 90s, we weren't talking about that anymore, and it's been interesting to a few people have come back with trying to say whether or not there's a gendered something, like is there a difference between women's and men's spirituality at all, right? Is that are these even meaningful categories for people to use? And of course, sometimes absolutely it's all women's spirituality. Women have more affective spirituality, and so all of these books written by men for women, no, that's confusing, have a lot of imaginative engagement with Christ. For example, there's a famous book that's attributed to Bonaventure, but it's not by him. It's by probably rewritten by a friar, but originally maybe written by a poor Clare. It's complicated, where you're imagining yourself into the situations of the gospel story, and giving yourself these meditations on it. See him. It's like a Mel Gibson
Right,
movie.
Anne Catherine Embrecht's visions did that. She's
that's it.
Is she blessed yet? Yeah, but she was 19th century. But you had said it was based on a much earlier tradition. Yeah.
Right. So her, like Anne Catherine Emmerich, which Mel Gibson used, is in that tradition of, and that particular kind of imaginary in the like positive sense of you're making images in your understanding of these scenes and participating in them and such. People since there's Sarah McNamar she and I have gone back and forth a little bit on some of this sometimes, because I'm not sure that the gendering works affectively in quite the way that she suggests, but on the other hand, to be fair, she makes a good point. She's done a lot of work on the Pseudo Bonaventure meditations to show that they're probably by a woman. Okay, so what do we do with any of this, right? And like, for example, the book that we're showing right now is a very famous manuscript that's at Yale called the Rothschild Canticles. It's manuscript 404 if you want to go to the Beinecke digital reader and find the full book. It's made for a woman. It's very clearly feminine in that sense, but the artist and compiler were men.
Yeah, what I noticed about all the pictures is the woman smiling off the pages. They're always smiling.
It's so sweet. I love this manuscript.
Yeah, it really is. Like, she's so happy on every page,
Yes. And there's lots of Song of Songs imagery in these, and there's all these veils and sunbursts and this very interesting series of Trinitarian images and such. So is this high theology? It's like the single most extraordinary series of Trinity images, right? But also, images of the lovers. So
Yeah, it looks like a romance illustrations.
right. Um, so River Run is saying skipping the rocks is so fun, but yes, scares the fish away. Yawn God. A man talking about his feelings is snitching. Well, okay.
His own feelings or somebody else's?
Anyway, so and as it were, so here we are, right? That
You
that
know, it's. Can I say something about the meditations like people like Anne Catherine Emmerich did? And it's related to, I think, why this is a particularly female thing. Is the reason we talk so much is because we like details. And so women are sitting let's say in Catherine Emmerich's case for decades, bedridden, thinking just about Christ's life and the life of his mother. She's going to think in like very exacting detail. But that's what we do in our speech too. And maybe that's what we do in our prayer. Maybe that's how it's different. Maybe it's just, maybe our thoughts they don't necessarily deep, but maybe they're just very complex, very complicated, and they kind of branch out in a lot of different directions.
okay.
And if you ever read her visions, they do. She gets crazy, specific with the detail.
I haven't read hers. I love Sor Maria Agreda's. Agreda, it's the mystical city of God, and hers is like 4 volumes and 3,000 pages, and it's like
Yeah, that's
it's
big.
it's I
Driven.
love it's like it's I've never enjoyed reading a spiritual sort of meditation more than I enjoyed reading The Mystical City. It's amazing. But okay,
Cool.
well, so I brought these are I know these. Casey doesn't, and we're going to do a little test. Okay.
I wasn't told there was going to be a test.
Here's a test. Okay, so first we're going to start with a description of the Song of Songs in the way in which, throughout the Middle Ages, the medieval Christians in both the East and the West understood the text, right? And the simplest version of this. Can you tell if it's written by a man or a woman?
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So this is on the Song of Songs as a mystical drama, right? It seems to me that this little book is an epithalamium, that is to say, a marriage song, which Solomon wrote in the form of a drama and sang under the figure of the bride, about to wed and burning with heavenly love towards her bridegroom, who is the Word of God. And deeply indeed did she love him, whether we take her as the soul made in his image or as the church. But this same scripture also teaches us what words this august and perfect bridegroom used in speaking to the soul or to the church who has been joined to him. And in this same little book that bears the title Song of Songs, we recognize, moreover, things that the bride's companions said, the maidens that go with her, and also some things spoken by the bridegroom's friends and followers. For the friends of the bridegroom also, in their joy at his union with the bride, have been able to say some things, at any rate those that they had heard from the bridegroom himself. In the same way, we find the bride speaking not to the bridegroom only, but also to the maidens. Likewise, the bridegroom's words are addressed not to the bride alone, but also to his friends. And that is what we meant just now when we said that the marriage song was written in dramatic form. For we call a thing a drama, such as the enaction of a story on the stage, when different characters are introduced and the whole structure of the narrative consists in their comings and goings among themselves. And this work contains these things one by one in their own order, and also the whole body of it consists of mystical utterances.
Shall I guess now?
Well, give impressions. So here we have the
Okay.
Rothschild Canticles is now showing some of the images from the Song of Songs. So, and maybe to remind people of what the Song of Songs is like, I should do a little reading from there. So do you understand? Do you understand what was just said about the Song of
Yes.
Songs? It's a marriage song.
Yes.
It's got
Right. It's a marriage
drama.
song. It's a drama. It's a play. There are different characters in it.
Right.
And they speak to each other. Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
And so this is, I mean, in the Song of Songs, there'll be things like this Chapter 5 is the best. I sleep and my heart watcheth, the voice of my beloved knocking. Open to me, my sister, my love, my dove, my undefiled, for my head is full of dew, and my locks of the drops of the night. I have put off my garment, how shall I put it on? I have washed my feet, how shall I defile them? My beloved put his hand through the keyhole, and my bowels were moved at his touch. I arose up to open to my beloved, and my hands dropped with myrrh, and my fingers were full of the choicest myrrh. I opened the bolt of my door to my beloved, but he had turned aside and was gone. My soul melted when he spoke. I sought him and found him not. I called, and he did not answer me. The keepers that go about the city found me. They struck me and wounded me. The keepers of the walls took away my veil from me. I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, if you find my beloved, that you tell him that I languished with love. So, and that kind of language, the text, the other text I was saying is explaining this is drama about the love of the bride and the bridegroom, which is God and the soul.
Mm-hmm. So the commentary was written by a woman?
What, the commentary?
Yeah.
Want to guess again?
The commentary was written. There's only 2 guesses, right? We're not that kind of show. Yes. A man.
It's Origin of Alexandria, and he actually establishes this mode of reading the Song of Songs is becomes standard throughout the Christian tradition. It has obvious parallels with the Jewish tradition, which also reads. If you read the Old Testament, you have God as the bridegroom of Jerusalem, of Zion, right, and the people of Israel as the bride. So there's a continuity there that's saying the church is the bride, but Origin gives it, and this is wonderful because the commentaries that I was working on for the 12th century, which take the bride and the bridegroom as Mary and Christ, take it quite imaginatively as this kind of, what kind of play is it, what kind of drama is it, and give the the different speaking parts. And these images that in this one, you're showing, catch me the little foxes that eat the vines because they're destroying them.
I was wondering what that was when I saw the picture.
Yeah, it's an illustration from the Song of Songs, right? But that's a man. That's Origin of Alexandria. Yon God says, I have a joke, Solomon, that he was the Trump of that time in Israel. No. So later when I read the Song of Songs when the bride says, Melania, I am, I thought it was the funniest thing ever. I think you need to explain that a little more. Right. So this has already made it complicated, right? If I'm saying that the men are reading the Song of Songs as their primary mystical book, what are you going to do with that, right? And
what do you do with that? Yeah.
Right. It's like, and this is, I said, one of the people that Caroline talked about is having this Jesus as mother image, particularly the Cistercians, like Bernard of Clairvaux, like the Jesus as mother image. And what Caroline argued is the abbots were often describing themselves as mother, and so they're modeling themselves on Christ, but it's in this maternal function that they have. So Bernard, continuing with this theme of reading the Song of Songs as this mystical treatise, describes this, for example. You'll recognize a lot of this is in in Draco Alchemicus.
A major influence, yes.
Oh yes, all of this stuff is in our poem. Okay, we said it was a love story. The king has brought me into his rooms. That's Song 1-3. And this is Bernard. So this is where the fragrance comes from. His is the goal of our running. She, the bride, had said that we must run, drawn by that fragrance, but not specify our destination. So it is to these rooms that we run, drawn by the fragrance that issues from them. The bride's keen senses have been quick to detect it, so eager is she to experience it in all its fullness. But first of all, we ought to give thought to the meaning of these rooms. To begin with, let us imagine them to be perfume-laden places within the bridegroom's quarters, where varied spices breathe their scents. where delights are manifold. The more valuable products of garden and field are consigned for preservation to storerooms like these. To these, therefore, people run, at least those who are aglow with the Spirit. The bride runs, so do the maidens, but the one to arrive first is the one whose love is most ardent, because she runs more quickly. On arrival, she brooks no refusal, not even delay. The door is promptly opened to her as to one of the family, one highly esteemed, loved with a special love, uniquely favored. Since the implications of the text are clear from what I've said, let us now try to discover the spiritual meaning of the storerooms. Further on, there is a mention of a garden and a bedroom, both of which I joined to these rooms for the purpose of this present discussion. When examined together, the meaning of each becomes clearer. Okay, so he's going to go on and just talk about the garden, the storeroom, and the bedroom. But let's talk about the bedroom. Your test here is to whom is he writing, men or women? You remember that I said the bedroom of the king is to be sought in the mystery of divine contemplation. And speaking of the ointments, I mentioned that many varieties of them are to be found in the bridegroom's presence, that all of them are not for everybody's use, but that each one differs according to his merits. Remember what I said about the women on YouTube, all you talking about cosmetics and clothes?
Yes.
So, too, I feel that the king has not one bedroom only, but several, for he has more than one queen. His concubines are many, his maids beyond counting, and each has her own secret rendezvous with the bridegroom and says, "My secret to myself, my secret to myself." It's apparently Isaiah. All do not experience the delight of the bridegroom's private visit in the same room. The Father has different arrangements for each. For we did not choose him, but he chose us and appointed places for us, and in the place of each one's appointment there he is too. Thus one repentant woman was allowed a place at the feet of the Lord Jesus, and another, if she really is another, found fulfillment for her devotion at his head. Thomas attained to this mystery of grace in the Savior's side, John on his breast, Peter in the Father's bosom, Paul in the third heaven. Who among us can see the difference between these various merits, or rather rewards?
Sounds like he's talking to a mixed male and female audience.
It's all guys.
She loves doing this to me.
Well, this is what's so funny about all I've blogged on this problem, gender fluidity, and how strange it has been for me for the last 10 years. You know, hearing people. Okay, so here right now in the pictures is showing the soul delighting at the bridegroom who's hiding up there in the sunburst, and in this image it's clearly a woman on the bed, right, in ecstasy at the thought of the bridegroom coming. But to consider that Bernard of Clairvaux wrote these very, very famous sermons on the Song of Songs for his brothers, and they are in the role that Origen gives them in the story. The men are the bridegroom of the men are the bride. Sorry, the men are the bride of Christ, who's the bridegroom.
That's why I thought he was talking to a mixed audience, like maybe it was he was preaching during a mass or something, because he talked about specific women like Mary Magdalene, and then he talked about specific men,
right,
like John and Thomas. And I thought, oh, he must be speaking to a mixed group. So
nope, he gave from what we can tell from his comments in the sermons, he gave these to the community at Clairvaux. And you know, he's talking to his brothers. There's a wonderful study, Cecily Lean, sorry, I'm bungling her last name, which is embarrassing because I wrote a review of the book, and it's a brilliant, brilliant book talking about how complicated it is to understand what Bernard is doing in these sermons with the gender, because he's in effect making the monks young women. They're the adolescensulae. They're the companions of the bride. And the bride is the soul in ecstasy, which he says he's never been, but the soul in the Song of Songs describes herself in that way. And so, right, you know, we as monks need to understand this. This is you see why things get really complicated very quickly. That if the men are using the Song of Songs, particularly in the 12th century, to talk about their own relationships with God, and it's this gendered language from the Song of Songs that makes the soul the female character. I'll tell you about Rupert of Deutz some other time. Okay. Right. So now, I mean, this is the richest tradition that we have of Christian spirituality throughout the Middle Ages, right? So
Mm.
these aren't these aren't obscure texts. Bernard of
Yeah.
Clairvaux was one of the most famous preachers in his day, and these they're excerpts from these sermons on the Song of Songs included in the Meditations on the Life of Christ that eventually Catherine of Emmerich would have known, right? So
Hmm.
it the women really like them, but he didn't. And here in the images we have the bride and the bridegroom, both chucking each other's chin in a sunburst. I love these. These pictures are so fun.
Yes.
Okay, number 3. This is a good test because you don't know what these texts are, and if you're confused by them, then it's a pure test, right? It's not
Mm.
right. One Pentecost at dawn, I had a vision. Matins were being sung in the church, and I was there. My heart and my veins and all my limbs trembled and shuddered with desire. And I was in such a state as I had been so many times before, so passionate, so terribly unnerved, that I thought I should not satisfy my lover, and my lover not fully gratify me. Then I would have to desire while dying, and die while desiring. At that time I was so terribly unnerved with passionate love and such pain that I imagined all my limbs breaking one by one, and all my veins were separately in tortuous pain. The state of desire in which I then was cannot be expressed by any words or any person that I know, and even that which I could say of it would be incomprehensible to all who hadn't confessed this love by means of acts of passion and who were not known by love. This much I can say about it. I desired to consummate my lover completely, and to confess and to savor to the fullest extent, to fulfill his humanity blissfully with mine, and to experience mine therein, and to be strong and perfect, so that I in turn would satisfy him perfectly, to be purely and exclusively and completely virtuous in every virtue. And to that end I wished inside me that he would satisfy me with his Godhead in one spirit, and he be all he is without restraint. For above all gifts I could choose, I choose that I may give satisfaction in all great sufferings. For that is what it means to satisfy completely, to grow to being God with God. For 'tis suffering and pain, sorrow and being in great new grieving, and letting this all come and go without grief, and to taste nothing of it but sweet love and embraces and kisses. Thus I desired that God should be with me, so that I should be fulfilled together with him.
Yikes.
If all of
That's
you aren't medievalists by the end of this episode.
sounds like somebody wants to physically consummate a relationship with God.
You want to hear some more? Same text. Then he came from the altar showing himself as a child, and that child had the very same appearance that he had in his first 3 years. And he turned to me, and from the ciborium he took his body in his right hand, and in his left hand he took a chalice that seemed to come from the altar, but I know not where it came from. Thereupon he came in the appearance and in the clothing of the man he was on that day when he first gave us his body, that appearance of a human being and a man, showing his sweet and beautiful and sorrowful face, and approaching me with the humility of one who belongs entirely to another. Then he gave himself to me in the form of the sacrament, in the manner to which people are accustomed. Then he gave to me to drink from the chalice in the manner and taste to which people are accustomed. Then he came to me himself and took me completely in his arms and pressed me to him, and all my limbs felt his limbs in the full satisfaction that my heart and my humanity desired. Then I was externally completely satisfied to the utmost satiation.
Am I supposed to guess? Is this a man or a woman?
You're supposed to guess.
Okay. Teresa of Avila?
Well, at least you got the sex right this time.
She's often depicted in artwork in ecstasy. That's why
Yes,
I
we do have
picked
some
her.
Teresa examples coming. This is
Okay.
Hadovich of Brabant, and she's early 13th century Beguine
Okay.
from the Low
I have not
Countries.
I have not heard of that name before.
Hadowich of Antwerp, sorry.
Hmm.
So what made you think it was a woman? It's sounding like Teresa of Avila is at least fair.
Because it sounds like the way a woman would speak about her desire for her husband.
Okay. Can you be more specific?
I'd rather not.
Well, you see why everybody got in the. So a lot of these texts were first being translated. Bernie McGinn, the one whose selections we're using here,
Mhm.
headed up a big translation series, the Classics of Western Spirituality, Paulus Press. If you want these texts, go there. This is. Uh,
It's a good publisher. Yeah.
this is a modern library, but the Paulus Press has a whole giant series now that Bernie was the main editor for, and
Hmm.
from the 80s, right? They started translating all of these spiritual classics, and so
Nice.
you can get all of these things. And of course, when I was in grad school, we were all very excited by all of these works because they are so alive, right? You're saying I'm not gonna say it sounds too sexy, but on the other hand, I mean, we saw what Bernard of Clairvaux was doing with his, right?
Yes.
So
But
it's
no, actually, it was Origin who had said it's like a play, right? And then
Origin said it's like a
Bernard,
play.
and Bernardo Clairvaux was maybe learning from him. But so if I think that's not as shocking as what you just read, because people were used to seeing plays and they were used to seeing men act the part of the women in plays. So if they were actually looking at it as a play, maybe they weren't quite so personal in their thoughts about it, in their
So, I
thoughts
mean,
about the
don't
songs.
make assumption. Don't one the Elizabethan theater with the men playing women's parts is only the Elizabethan theater.
Oh,
Women,
really? They had women actresses back in the Middle Ages?
yes, I mean as
Oh, I didn't
actresses,
know that.
yeah, but something like Hildegard. We have to do an episode entirely on Hildegard, but Hildegard did a
That would be
play, the
fun.
play of the virtues for her own nuns.
Hmm.
The text that we have of the plays from the earlier period seemed to, I mean, like there's Adam and Eve plays, there's the cycle plays, like the town plays that people would pun it. It seems like women acted in those. So
Okay.
it was just the Elizabethan theater that made the men play women's parts.
So it was the Protestants who wanted the women to be silent.
You see why I there's another example that I'm trying to find now that I've managed not to mark in my. I know it's in here, and I forgot where he put it. Sorry, just a second. Okay. Right. So you were certain that that one was a woman desiring God as a lover.
Yes.
It was the
She
night.
has this wink in her eye like she's going to like mess with me now.
It was the night preceding the day that the Christian religion calls Ash Wednesday, when heads are solemnly sprinkled with ashes in healing correction of the sin of our first parents who wanted to be like God, although they were only dust and ashes. While I was sleeping lightly, I seemed to be speaking to a friend who was asking me what I should do, with how much effort I ought to renew my search for finding death. In response, I said, as is true, that it was a weighty matter, and that I did not, and I did really did desire it because of the many dangers from the sins that occur in this life. Nevertheless, I should recognize that considerable outlay is needed to prepare even a little bit to depart from this life. While I was saying such things, suddenly I was taken away from the person I was speaking with, and I saw, as it were, heaven above open slightly, and from there a golden glowing mass of ineffable substance from the living substance quickly and rapidly descend. Heavier than gold and sweeter than honey, it fell into my breast, and by its size and weight woke me up right away. The place where it had fallen at first was quiet for a little space of time and kept itself from any movement, and I also was quiet, lying flat and awaiting what would happen. But soon it began to move and to circulate in the womb of my interior person, the soul's womb. To what extent of its capacity I did not know. This living thing in true life moved around in a wondrous way, and each circuit was always greater and much larger than the one preceding it. There were many circuits, but I did not stop to count them. In a wonderful and unspeakable way, these floods moved around, one after the other, and poured into each other, until finally the last flood, like some vast overflowing river, led me to understand and perceive that the whole capacity of the heart and the soul was full and could hold no more. When that happened, it again was still for a little while, not flowing inward as it had before, nor flowing outward as it was to do later. In the meantime, my interior person, as it were, wished to see the appearance of the living substance more clearly, but it hid itself in some way so that its appearance could not be seen, since it could only be borne as a very great weight and felt as a great sweetness. Later it began to turn back, and on the other side, under the gaze of the eyes of the inner person, the act of circling poured forth from the left side like a river. When the final circuit had flowed out, it stopped for a bit, and I looked and saw that the substance was extremely beautiful, like liquid gold. When it was over and my sensation of it gone, I did not know what ought to be done in the future. I was only sorry that it had said nothing about my intention. I would have received it as a very great grace if it had said, "This year, as you hoped, you will depart from the body."
So I think this is something you spoke about before. This is a man that wrote this, and this shock was that he talked about a womb, and that was
She
what was shocking.
remembered.
I did. See, I listened.
Very good. Yeah, this is a problem. Once you put, it's like, okay, this is Rupert of Deutz, and it's in a series of visions he describes, and this is, what Bernie it's described this one as the spiritual pregnancy scene.
Yes.
I think it sounds to me like I've said this. I've written about Rupert a lot too. There's a whole section in my book on his commentary on the Song of Songs. That more recently I realized he's probably actually describing like watching gold go into a mold, right?
Oh, right. Yeah.
Because he's a Benedictine, and they're goldsmiths that are very famously working in the region in his lifetime. Rogers of Helmerhausen, who makes some of the beautiful like gospel book covers and things and crosses and such that we have. And so that I mean, it could be a craft image rather than simply a pregnancy image, but he definitely says it's a womb, right? So
Yes.
he's described himself as being filled with, and you could, it's like you'd already figured it out that I was trying to trick you again, but I mean, that swirling gold, oh my gosh, right? That sense of ecstasy and release and such, like
Yes, those are kind of masculine images there. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, so when they all go sexual on you, and then you're saying, William James famously read some of these, like Gertrude the Great of Helfta's, and the later medieval women like Gertrude and Mechthild, and there's a few others that I have in here potentially, describing themselves as having Jesus as their lover. And he's just like, oh, it's just, William James is writing in the late 19th, early 20th century. It's just these women who are, sex starved. He doesn't say it quite that way, but it's implication. Whereas, the men, right? And so again, the Protestants will get all over this. It's like all of these poor people. Rupert had been an oblate. Bernard wasn't. He was an adult when he became a monk. So, Origen famously, there's a story that he castrated himself. We're not really did that. You could say that most of these examples are unusual because they're monastic examples, but then they become part of the vocabulary of Christian spirituality. So how are we supposed to think about our relationship with God?
What became part of the vocabulary of Christian spirituality?
All of this, the Song of Songs, sexual imagery.
Okay.
And it's both men and women. Both the men and the women are using it. Sarah's in the house. Ooh, I wrote an exchange between an old holy priest and a seminarian about this concept, men being the brides, in one of my novels.
Cool.
And Jan God going, oh boy, man, dice throw. What's the dice for? These are, maybe means a man. I'm guessing a man. You give me that hot take.
I think it's easy.
Okay, well, this is a problem, right? And this has come up in some people's discussion. This is Jan God's suggestion. Compare gay male spirituality with straight male spirituality. These guys are celibate, okay? So we'll just start with that. Because apparently homosexual contributions to civilization are not trivial.
I don't think there's any difference between gay male sexuality and heterosexual male sexuality. I think the male brain is different than the female brain, and I think the sexual expression. Well, if you were to take these readings that you just did as just the quote gospel truth of male sexuality, male spirituality and female spirituality, you'd think that they were inextricably linked. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think the reason these lasted as many centuries as they did is because they're very unusual. Um, People don't normally think in those terms. I think it's easy to see the church, even Christ as mother, because he feeds his children with his own body. And that the most famous artistic depiction of this is the I think it's an albatross. I think pecks its own breast. Pelican pecks its own breast and feeds its children with its blood. And I've seen that on inside of churches and in stained glass before. It's a pretty old image.
Mm-hmm.
So
they like it in the Middle Ages. Yeah, it's
that one's pretty easy to understand. The sexuality stuff is just weird, and I would just reject it.
It's in the scriptures. It's there in the Song of Songs.
The Song of Songs isn't. I don't think it's nearly as graphic as that first one from Antwerp.
From Hadowitch.
Yeah, that was.
I don't know. Shall I read? I mean, I read you the one from chapter 5 where he puts his hand through the lattice and right.
He put his. I think that sounds familiar.
Well, okay.
Yes.
So this one is like, my beloved put his hand through the keyhole and my bowels removed at his touch. They love that. I mean, so that passage, the one. So I'm making my slides move forward again. There we go. That one Rupert uses in his commentary in the Song of Songs, placing it in the character of the bride, who he says is a young woman, but there's a commentator, or not a commentator, just a marginal comment in one of the manuscripts saying this is him, right? That he's using that passage from the Song of Songs where the bridegroom touches her through the lattice to be his moment of being touched, to be awakened and then go out and preach, right? And this is what's interesting about Rupert's use of this female imagery in his Marian commentary on the Song of Songs, is that in his story, after the bride is awakened in this way in chapter 5 of the Song of Songs, she goes out to preach. The Mary becomes the teacher of the apostles and goes out into the world and preaches. And Rupert says, and this is the way that he ended up with his, we'd say now called vocation, right? But he's driven to write the commentaries that he does, and he writes more commentaries on the scriptures than anybody had for hundreds of years, right? He's incredibly important early 12th century commentator, and that he's deep in this symbolic tradition, but he's completely maverick in the degree of like storytelling that he puts into it, creating this narrative out of the Song of Songs and such that becomes his narrative. So he's using Mary as his model for becoming a preacher and a writer on the basis of these erotic metaphors
from the Song of Songs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm worried that my slides are frozen. Just a sec.
Yeah, our connection was acting a little funky when we first started before we went live.
Well, no, it's just they're such big pictures. I had two stacks of them, and the first one was advancing nicely on its own, and the second one is.
You had a lot of them. Like
I wanted to show you all of the pictures from the book. Okay,
they're beautiful. They are, and it just can't get over the smile. It's just lovely.
They're all they're all so sweet and cheerful, right? And there's that.
They're very cheerful. Yeah.
Wonderful one of the lamb dancing with yes. We have to use that by the end of Draco Chemicus, in Act 7 when everybody gets to be happy.
Yes. Oh, don't put in spoilers.
It's called The Wedding. I think they may have guessed.
That's not the red wedding. Don't worry.
It's called A Love Story. That I was handing out cards at the parish picnic, and I gave one to one of the men at church, right? And he looked at the list of chapters. He said, "Ooh, it ends in a wedding. That means you need another X. You know what happens after the wedding?" And I'm like, "Oh my goodness!" It's like the children. He was very excited. He was very sweet, and
That's
it's like,
nice.
yeah, it's like the just from the court through the wedding, and or the the casino, the court, market, carnival, meat hall, spaceport wedding. But he does like, oh, it's a happy ending, right? And we're gonna have this. Okay. Well, now that okay, this one is you don't have to guess because the pronouns are in there, and I'm not gonna take them out. But consider what it's like the imagery we've been um, thinking about and who this is. There always has to be a quiz because that helps you pay attention.
Okay.
Okay. Therefore, he was lifted up into God by seraphic burning desire and transformed by compassionate sweetness into him who willed to be crucified out of excessive love. One morning around the time of the Feast of the Holy Cross, while he prayed on the mountainside, he saw descending from heaven's height a seraph having 6 wings, both burning and shining. When in swift flight he had come to a place in the air near the man of God, the figure of a crucified man appeared in the midst of the wings, having his hands and feet stretched out in the manner of a cross, and also fastened to a cross. 2 wings were raised above his head, 2 were stretched out to fly, and 2 covered the whole body. When he saw this, he wondered greatly, his heart experiencing joy mixed with sorrow. He rejoiced in the kindly gaze with which Christ, under the form of a seraph, looked upon him, but the fact that he was fastened to a cross pierced his soul with the very sword of compassionate sorrow. He was in exceedingly great awe at the sight of such an unfathomable vision, knowing that the weakness of Christ's passion was scarcely compatible with the immortality of a seraphic spirit. Finally, he understood by revelation from the Lord that this kind of vision was presented to his sight by divine providence, so that Christ's friend should know beforehand that he would be transformed into the likeness of Christ crucified, not through bodily martyrdom, but through complete conflagration of mind. Therefore, as the vision disappeared, it left a marvelous burning in his heart, but in his flesh it impressed a no less marvelous copy of the marks. Immediately the marks of the nails began to appear in his hands and feet, just as he had beheld them shortly before in the image of the crucified man. His hands and feet seemed to be pierced in the middle by the nails, with the nail heads showing on the inner side of the hands and on the tops of the feet, and their points coming out on the other side. The nail heads in the hands and feet were black and round, their points were oblong, pushed and bent back as it were, and they emerged from the flesh and extended beyond the rest of the skin. His right side was pierced as though by a lance, and a red scar covered the surface, which often poured out sacred blood, sprinkling his tunic and undergarments.
That's St. Francis of Assisi.
Yep.
Yeah, he's one of the few male stigmatists in history. Yeah.
Yeah, well, if I read Rupert's version of that kind of imagery, you'd be going, So
Would be rightly horrified.
yeah, well, I mean, that's interesting that so it's Francis, right? And we all love Francis, and he carries the stigmata from the seraph.
Mm-hmm.
Rupert has a similar image where a crucifix comes down and kisses him on the mouth. And then he has
Christ kisses him on the mouth.
yep, and then he has another one where the whole figure presses down on him, body to body. That's Rupert, 100 years before Francis.
Sounds a bit gay.
And well, you don't think it's gay with Francis, did you? Right?
Well,
And he's
that's not what you
bleeding
read,
into his
though.
undergarments by the end.
Well,
So
he had the stigmata all over his body, didn't he? He had it everywhere: hands, feet, side, head.
right, but so the problem with all of this spiritual imagery, very bodily, right? And this is I somewhere where Caroline was trying to say she did notice Francis's fasting and his devotion to the sacrament, and tried to say, okay, but his spirituality was somehow different from the women's in their embrace of Christ's humanity. But I mean, Francis becomes Christ in his configured to Christ, in his wounds.
Yeah.
And so is Francis's configuring of himself God configures Francis to himself. Is Francis's taking on that imagery like or unlike the way Hadowich is describing wanting to carry all the suffering and, be embraced, pain, sorrow.
Right. Her desire to do that, her passionate desire to do that, was mixed with what sounded like some pretty strong sexual imagery, which is just disturbing to me. I didn't like hearing it. I didn't hear anything erotic about Francis's his getting the stigmata. It didn't sound erotic. It sounded very personal. It sounded like a very personal interaction between him and Christ in this vision, but it didn't sound erotic to me.
John God is being mischievous in the comments. A celibate man, a gay man, is still gay. My question was a fine question. Another word.
Yeah, but he's not a woman. Gay men are not women. That's my point.
Cheerful and happy is gay. I don't make up these words. And daydreamer, hello. And young God. Let's not forget Jacob wrestling with an angel all night so he can be renamed Israel come morning. Interesting that you mentioned that. So Rupert uses the image of Jacob wrestling with the angel at the beginning of his commentary on the Song of Songs to describe what he's done in writing the commentary. So yes. Daydreamer says, I joined late. What are we reading? Should we tell him? Casey is feeling distinctly uncomfortable.
Yeah.
After the cringy Hadowich.
It's pretty cringy.
What's funny is I marked a bunch and then I didn't think we'd get through all of them, but this is let me try another one. Okay, so this is another woman. Okay. Well, I told you it's a woman. This is Mechtilde of Magdeburg. The desire of the Holy Fathers for the liberation of the human race. This cry pierced the clouds and came to the ears of the Lord of Hosts. The Eternal Father said, I regret my work. I made a bride so praiseworthy that I destined her for my high majesty. I assigned the supreme powers for her service. Even Lucifer himself, had he remained in glory, would have been her servant. For her alone was the bed and the marriage chamber made ready, but she rejected the divine beauty and was made ugly and very contemptible, going your same ways over again. And who will stoop to take such filthiness upon himself? The only begotten Son of God, recognizing his image in man, bowing his majesty low in a fitting fashion before the Father, said, With your blessing, Father, I will freely take on human nature despite its pollution, and I will wash its wounds through my innocent blood, and I will heal its broken places with the bindings of the scorn of my exile, even unto death. I will lay down my soul for sin, and through the death I have not merited, I will then settle the debt that I have not snatched away by force. I will return to you with life accompanying me, having taken the kingdom with the 2 squadrons of Jews and Gentiles, leading all back to you with the victory of all Israel. When he heard these things, the sweet spirit of both of them said, Almighty God, our procession into the world will be beautiful and totally marvelous. Let us then go forth from here with great glory, but without leaving behind this majesty, by withdrawing our present high station from these beings that exist here. Even unto the present I have served as the faithful guardian and attendant of the Virgin Mary in this same place. Then the Father, bowed down in love by the appeal of both, said to the Holy Spirit, You will be the one who bears my light before the sun into the hearts of all, who will be devoutly moved to his fiery speech in a strong fashion. And you, Son, will take up your cross and go forth into Egypt and free my people. I will be with you more than I was with Moses, and I will walk with you all in your paths. I will hold your hand, I will lead you forth with my will, and will lead you back to me with eternal glory. For you I have prepared the immaculate, unimpaired mother of unsullied virginity, so that you may be able to bear the deadly nature of the base crowd of humans more honorably and more purely than all others, and to exalt the nature united to you in an ineffable manner. Then the procession set forth with joy from the height of heaven down to the mystical temple of Solomon, editor, i.e. Mary, in which through 9 months the Almighty Son of God deigned to remain to be adored until the days for the Virgin Mary Mother to bring forth were completed.
Was that Dame Catherine Emmerich?
No, that was Mechtilde Magdeburg.
Oh, right. I was okay. A German though, right? Because
she's 13th century.
Yeah, she's using very martial imagery, and Emmerich did the same thing. And I thought that was maybe that might have been just a Germanic cultural thing.
Well, these women mystics are very famous in Germany. So I like I said, I haven't studied Emmerich, but it's very likely that she has. I mean, she certainly has access to some of this imagery in the tradition.
Yeah.
But what I liked, it's like one, it's fitting the, like, here's the drama, right? We're giving speaking parts to the Trinity.
Yeah, right. And that's exactly what Emmerich did also. Which,
Okay.
like, yeah, it's like watching. There was a movie going on in her head, and she described every little bit of it, right down to the material and the patterns on the clothes people were wearing.
Right, right. And I'm getting you start getting these confused, although they are actually different. That one of the
Yeah.
things these 13th and 14th century women do is they often write sort of dialogues.
Oh,
One in the option is Marguerite Perret. One of the few people burned in the Middle Ages for a book, um, which was
wow.
yeah. Uh,
So they said she was guilty of heresy. Was that why she was burned?
yep.
Oh, wow. Ouch.
You want to hear some of hers? Okay.
You seem to want to tell me. Go ahead.
Oh well, it's the mirror of simple annihilated souls. Uh, hmm. Well, this is not a good example of what I was trying to think of because one of the things Marguerite does in the Mirror of Simple Souls is have various speaking characters, and one of the
Hmm.
things that's complicated about it is reason dies at some point, which is sort of puzzling, and then there's the soul, and she makes another of these kind of um, spiritual allegory dramas,
Hmm.
but it starts back there with Origin claiming that the Song of Songs is a particular kind of
Right.
marriage song as a drama, and that ironically, since Origin is himself declared a heretic, sort of, right? So they're always it's a weird kind of way in which Origin is on the one hand the origin of this Song of Songs commentary tradition, and on the other, they're a little suspicious of using him. But on the other, they love the Song of Songs as a source for this kind of imagery. But that both the men and the women are using it throughout the tradition. It's like all of like we've had Origin and Bernardo Clairvaux and Hadovich and Mechtild and then Bonaventure with describing Francis. This intensity of the physical spiritual relationship becomes so powerful for all of them. You can
Mm.
Felix Ruber made a comment and then took it away. So Daydreamer, we're trying to test what's the difference between men and women's spirituality. And
Well,
the
it's so what you're using as examples. So in the Middle Ages, there didn't seem to be much of a difference,
well, the thing is, I do
or it
feel
was
that there
very
is a
subtle.
difference, and this is why Caroline got in trouble with Kathleen. Although Kathleen was in criticizing Caroline and saying the women had a particular mode of spirituality, was
Mm.
simply arguing that you can't essentialize women. All women, can't say all women, and you're like, oh my gosh. So she was calling into question the existence of a category woman. Kathleen was Biddick.
Okay.
My problem is, and the thing is, we established at the beginning, men and women do have different. I mean, present living women, the men go fishing, the women chatter at each other in the dog park. I don't know, right? That we we do seem to have different modes of engaging intensely
Yes.
with our contemplation, and one of the things that people found of this medieval women's spirituality is, oh, it's all this erotic stuff. But then, unfortunately, if you start looking at the men's, it's kind of all erotic
Yeah.
too.
Right.
And you could say, well, maybe the men's is more systematized. That gets you into trouble because we'll end up with, oh, I don't know. You want a trees of Avila? We'll have some trees of Avila. Okay, so this is the description from her life of her vision, but we could also have if you read the interior castle, it's actually completely different from this. It's incredibly schematic and mansions and doors, and I
Mm.
listened to the whole thing and got completely lost listening to it because it's not very there's not many characters in it in the same way in there might be in the other women's writing. So I don't know,
Right.
right? Even within one person's writing, you could try to say, oh well, maybe the women are more like full of imagery and not schematic. But Teresa of Avila is schematic too. Anyway, you thought you felt bad about Hadowich. Hold up, hold your horses. Okay. Our Lord was pleased that I should have at times a vision of this kind. I saw an angel close by me on my left side in bodily form. This I am not accustomed to see except very rarely. Though I have visions of angels frequently, yet I see them only by an intellectual vision, such as I have spoken of before. It was our Lord's will that in this vision I should see the angel in this way. He was not large, but small of stature and most beautiful, his face burning as if he were one of the highest angels, who seemed to be all of fire. They must be those whom we call cherubim. Their names they never tell me, but I see very well that there is in heaven so great a difference between one angel and another, and between these and the others, that I cannot explain it. I saw in his hand a long spear of gold, and at the iron's point there seemed to be a little fire. He appeared to me to be thrusting it at times into my heart, and to pierce my very entrails. When he drew it out, he seemed to draw them out also, and to leave me all on fire with the great love of God. The pain was so great that it made me moan, and yet so surpassing with the sweetness of this excessive pain that I could not wish to be rid of it. The soul is satisfied now with nothing less than God. The pain is not bodily, but spiritual, though the body has its share in it, even a large one. It is a caressing of love so sweet that now takes place between the soul and God, that I pray God of his goodness to make him experience it who may think that I am lying. During the days that this lasted, I went about as if beside myself. I wished to see or speak with no one, but only to cherish my pain, which was to me a greater bliss than all created things could give me. I was in this state from time to time, whenever it was our Lord's pleasure to throw me into these deep raptures that I could not prevent even when I was in the company of others, and which to my deep vexation came to be publicly known. Since then I do not feel that pain so much, but only that which I spoke of before, which is in many ways very different from it and of greater worth. On the other hand, when this pain of which I am now speaking begins, our Lord seems to lay hold of the soul and to throw it into an ecstasy, so that there is no time for me to have any sense of pain or suffering, because fruition ensues at once. May he be blessed forever, who has bestowed such great graces on one who has responded so ill to blessings so great.
I think I have read that before. Yeah.
Bernini knew
And
what he
that's what,
was
yeah,
doing, right, with his
exactly. Yeah.
statue, right?
Right.
That
That was the statue of the angel with the arrow, right?
Beyond God. I mean, come on, guys. The Daydreamer. Got it. So you're saying romantasy is a return to female spirituality.
Oh, God. Oh, that's funny.
Well, yes.
It's a bad attempt at it, but yeah, I can see the point. Yeah.
You see, indeed, we said in Draco Chemicus we're writing a love story. With a lot of this imagery, right, of the incarnate bridegroom and we got more characters going on than just him and the bride. We're going to get to the wedding eventually. That yes, romantasy. I'd say romantasy does this because in the way in which critics are saying the okay, rude names that you can't use on YouTube. Heroes are always described as like divine in some way, right? That they're very much these kind of divine lover characters. Absolutely. Romantasy is wannabe Song of Songs.
Yeah, that's an interesting way. I don't know that, because I don't know anybody who writes that stuff. I don't know if they're aware of what they're doing.
Well, I can vouch that Anne Rice is.
Oh, true. Yeah.
Because she read my book.
Oh.
Well, I mean, she also grew up Catholic, right? And then
Mhm.
went through various. It isn't Catholic, not Catholic, is Catholic, not Catholic. But when she was doing her book on the first person account of Jesus, the Jesus biography series,
Mhm.
I did a little huffy, like, oh, I feel so frustrated. She gets to be a bestseller, and who am I? And then
Yeah.
I found out she referenced my From Judgment to Passion in her reading, her recommended reading, and I'm like,
Aw, that's lovely.
So guys, if you want to know the backstory that Anne Rice had for some of her stuff. And the thing is, it's from these Song of Songs commentaries. It's Rupert of Deutz and Honorius, and Philip of Harvinx is even more sexy, and William Newborough is even more like first-person meditation narrative stuff.
Mhm.
And what's wild about it is thinking, this interior world of imagining ourselves in relationship with God has such a, it's an amazingly vivid tradition, right?
Yeah, I'm surprised there was so much of it. I guess that's the only thing that surprises me, but maybe they were copying each other's style? I don't know.
Well, the Song of Songs is in scripture, right? So
No,
it's
wasn't talking about that. I just was talking about the commentaries and the visions and the ecstasies and the contemplations and
right. So
yeah.
the women's things like Hadowich were not well known, particularly because many of the women wrote their texts originally in the vernacular.
Oh.
And as now, if you want to get something have worldwide distribution, it needs to be in English, or at least
Hmm.
it's some parts of the world worldwide. Then it needed to be in Latin. So the only ones that got really extensive circulation, uh, even so, like Hildegard's are only in like handful of manuscripts.
Hmm.
Uh, they're Bernard of Clairvaux, however, is out there in hundreds of them. So what they're taking is Bernard influences a lot of this potential because of how
Hmm.
famous he was as a promoter of the Cistercians and um, how widely copied his texts were. However, there are others, right? Oh, we have a little more time. Let me give you maybe one more example. One of the extremely important sources of all of this is the um, the Victorines, and let me see. Certainly, both Hugh of St. Victor and Richard of St. Victor, they're 12th century Cistercian, they're 12th century Parisian house of Augustinian canons. Their mystical sort of itineraries and such become very important for the Franciscans. The Franciscans really like them. Okay, so this is this excerpt from Richard of St. Victor's The Four Degrees of Violent Charity.
What a name. Okay.
By but let us return to the degree of love that we placed first and already called wounding love. Does not your heart sometimes seem shot through when that fiery dart of love penetrates the human mind to its interior and pierces the affection through and through to such an extent that it cannot in any way restrain or hide the heat of its desire? He burns with desire. He is aflame in affection. He is feverish. He gasps, deeply groans, and sighs at length. These are your sure signs of a wounded soul, groans and sighs, in a pale and haggard face. We called the first degree of love that which wounds, the second that which binds. Surely a soul is truly and certainly bound when it cannot forget or think about anything save this one thing. Whatever it does, whatever it says, it is always turning this thing over in its mind and constantly thinks about it. When the soul sleeps, she dreams of it. When she is awake, she thinks about it at every hour. I think it is easy to understand how this degree, which does not allow a person's mind any peace, even for an hour, surpasses the first. For the former is rightly said to be that which wounds, the second that which binds. It is often less to be wounded than to be bound. Note, Richard gives the example of a wounded knight escaping a battle contrasted with a knight who is wounded and captured. Love now ascends to the third degree of violence when it excludes every other attraction, when it loves nothing but that one thing and for the sake of that one thing. In this third stage of violent charity, nothing is able to satisfy the soul save the one thing, just as it has no taste for anything save for the sake of that one thing. The soul loves that one, desires it, thirsts for it, yearns after it. The soul gasps for it, sighs after it, is on fire from it, and finds its rest in it. The soul takes its refreshment in it and finds its satisfaction in it alone. Nothing is sweet or tasty that is not flavored with it. Anything else that comes along or that happens by chance is quickly rejected and trodden underfoot, because it does not serve that attraction and pay homage to its desire. But who can fittingly describe the tyranny of that attraction, how it excludes every pastime, how it violently represses every activity that it seems does not cater to its desires? The fourth degree of violent charity is when nothing at all is able to satisfy the desire of the burning soul. This stage, because it goes beyond the bounds of human capability once and for all, unlike the others, knows no limit to its growth because it always finds something more to long after. Whatever the soul may do, or whatever may happen to it, does not satisfy the desire of the burning soul. It thirsts and drinks, but its drinking does not assuage its thirst. Rather, the more it drinks, the more it thirsts. They're fishing, you think?
Yeah.
Shh, you'll disturb the fish.
I thought of the title of my favorite movie as you're reading that, because it perfectly describes what you just described by reading there. Punch Drunk Love.
Right, but this is guys
Yeah.
talking about God. No wonder they want us to shut up.
Right, but but they're using expressions of like human love to describe a love for God, and the only way you can just and Punch Drunk Love is about a guy who's like he is punch drunk in love with this woman. He just goes nuts. Is completely obsessed with her, and it's a lovely movie, by the way. I highly recommend it.
Say
Punch
the
Drunk Love.
Punch Drunk
It's Adam
Love.
Sandler. It's the only good movie, truly, really good, great movies ever made. But yeah, it just describes somebody with complete and utter obsession because he's just in love and just nothing in his life satisfies him, and he just has to have this woman.
Right.
And he does anything to get near her, to be near her, to stay near her, and he can't think of it doing anything else but. And so I just thought it was the best title of a movie ever, of a love story, because that perfectly describes it when you are in love with somebody. So these people are writing in the Middle Ages are in love with God.
Yes.
And that's what they're describing. And that makes sense. I could do without the heavy eroticism, but yeah, that makes sense.
Well, what's funny, so the Love Boat, which we have invoked previously.
Yeah.
No, what's interesting is it's old enough television that the men are very sweet, right? It's like, and I think the back in the day when you were allowed to let men be human,
Yeah.
that this fits with my theme of when Kiltz and I did the What Men Really Want. We read all the love poetry.
Right. That was great. Yeah.
Right. What men, guys, we get it. You're softies.
Well, they're passionate. The men are very
Yes.
passionate.
So Yon God is claiming, if I think about it, the biggest difference between male spirituality and female spirituality is every man thinks he's Pope. You're aiming too low. And women don't think that way. Guys, I figured it out.
Okay. Women don't. Yeah, Karen from the parish council begs to disagree with you, but go on.
Yes, Karen. Well, so I have my Rare Guild is bigger than yours T-shirt, right? And the tariffs on the back of it. Of course, the department secretary or the administrator is higher than everybody, right? What are you talking about? Karens don't need to be Pope.
Oh, that's funny.
Right. So it's the I think the guys, we get it. This is what you are sitting there thinking about when you're telling us to shut up while you're fishing. This is Thomas Traherne. The Rapture. Sweet infancy, O fire of heaven, O sacred light, how fair and bright, how great am I, whom all the world doth magnify. O heavenly joy, O great and sacred blessedness which I possess, so great a joy who did into my arms convey. From God above being sent, the heavens me inflame, to praise his name, the stars do move, the burning sun doth show his love. O how divine am I to all this sacred wealth, this life and health, who raised, who mine, did make the same, what hand divine. Or Hopkins, if we want this. We have to have some Hopkins, right?
Mm-hmm.
The world is charged with the grandeur of God. It will flame out like shining from shook foil. It gathers to a greatness like the ooze of oil. Crushed. Why do men then now not wreck his rod? Generations have trod, and all is seared with trade, bleared, smeared with toil, and bears man's smudge and shares men's smell. The soil is bare now, nor can foot feel being shod, and for all this nature is never spent. There lives the dearest freshness deep down things, and though the last lights from the black west went, O morning at the brown brink eastward springs, because the Holy Ghost over the bent world broods with warm breast and with bright wings. So, differences?
Differences between men and women,
Yeah.
spirituality.
It is more complicated, right?
It
They
is. It is
they
more
just don't
complicated,
talk about it, but they write it down, the guys. And I
but they
think
write about it. Yeah.
right, and Daydreamer's right. Romanticy is to a large extent female spirituality, right? It's um, but the men's is also erotic in a fashion that I you know
They are. The thing is, if you were comparing men and women who weren't, great writers or famous ones, uh, and if you ask them, they might express themselves differently. But the people who are writing it down and meditating very long times on it, they came up with similar. But I would say that the stuff the women were writing was far more graphic. And
usually it feels more embarrassing, but you read Rupert and it's hard not to have. It's like how are you, because you know it's a man, right?
well, yeah, he's talking about the eroticism of the Song of Songs, but the women are engaging in erotic thoughts involving themselves.
Mm.
So it's more personal that way.
Well,
And it
but
still comes back to the
that's him feeling himself filled with gold in his womb.
that wasn't nearly as graphic as that the one from Antwerp.
she's in
That,
she's
well, I'm still in
horrified.
shock.
She's still in
I'm pretty
shock.
horrified. I am horrified. I'll admit it. I don't really ever want to read that again. But it does illustrate the way the fact that women do talk. They will communicate details more. I mean, they're both writing a level of eroticism in the spirituality in these particular examples, but the women had far more detail in it. Though when you just read that poem from Hopkins, he was being fairly he was giving fairly specific detail, and I like poetry that does this where they can put images in your mind
Hmm.
a lot. And but that wasn't a vision, that was a poem. That was different, and the men can
Right.
be very very good poets. In fact, superior in my readings of several hundred years worth of poems.
The men are stronger
Yeah.
poets.
Oh yes. Yeah. And I was just reading it. I was just reading an Emily Dickinson poem that I love, and because I could not stop for death. I was reading that
Mm.
yesterday. It's a beautiful poem, but it just does not have the level of skill that of Hopkins, what you just read, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's up there with the mathematics and men. Right?
Yeah.
I appreciate. I can appreciate it. I appreciate the mathematics, but I don't have the skill to go as high as some do with their
Mhm.
mathematics. Um, I'm actually torn because on the on the one hand, I mean this goes back to our beginning, statement of like you're describing me as being able to go both sides of the
You can.
conversation.
Yeah.
I certainly appreciate the men's version of things, although so I'm reading, reading it from the book on mysticism. I'm picking things that are in that mode as opposed to Peter Lombard's sentences, which I still find deathly dull. Right. The men's theological discussions, which I think are in fact actually mathematics.
Hmm.
I think the guys that delight in that kind of scholastic disputation, they're trying to structure things
Oh, they're trying to build homes,
mathematically.
and women are trying to make them into homes.
Yes, I mean the women, we do, we the women. like we like the stories, but men write stories too. So, I do think in the long run, modernity is being very cruel to men in claiming that they don't have interior lives, because the women are constantly saying they don't, simply because they just want to sit and watch the fish, and
Yeah, simply because they're not verbalizing it every
right.
waking moment of the
They're not
day.
talking about it
We
all the
do.
time. And
Yeah.
yet, and this is, I mean, what I'm enjoying watching Love Boat now than when I was watching it when I was 12, right? Is I can see that the men are hurt a lot regularly in very interesting ways. Like that show was more sort of bluntly honest about
Mm,
the relationships between men and women. Then I was thinking, when did it happen that we ended up with? In fact, the romanticy problem is the men are all turned into sex toys for the women, like
yeah.
in Sex in the City. The
Hmm.
men have crises and stories and things like that, but they don't really have care. They don't get to suffer in any particular way. When does Friends do this? Who does? Like where do you end up with men doing nothing but making ironic quips and being ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
That based on my reading of this long tradition of Christian spirituality, the men may not be talking about it. I mean, see, their traditions in the Benedictines are not talking at all, right? Because they're keeping silent.
Hmm.
But man, are they writing about stuff, or that they're giving themselves, like the Victorines, these meditations on love. These are all men writing for other men, and the women pick up on it and like it, and
Hmm.
want the men to be their spiritual directors. But the men are writing it for each other
Interesting.
as training manuals, and like you could that it was interesting with the Richards, because partly because Bernie's selection didn't include the whole text, but that Richard's talking about that violent love and then using knightly metaphors for it,
Mm,
right? So,
yeah.
that there's brothers in arms
Yes.
level of friendship um, involved in it as well, like Tolkien would in the fellowship of the men,
Hmm.
right? So, John, God, you're not helping. The firstborn son inherits. The secondborn is backup to the firstborn. The thirdborn is sent to the church, where he writes things like this. Oversimplifications. Yes.
It's
especially
like, yeah.
especially since Bernard of Clairvaux took his whole family into the monastery. He talked all his other
Mhm.
brothers into coming in with him. I don't think
Oh,
Rupert was an oblate, and so I don't think he knew his family. Sibling dynamics don't work if you don't. I mean, it's like two examples, right? I don't think Rupert knew his siblings except for the men that he was in the community with, and Bernard brought his whole family into the order. Men that were already married and knights gave up their families to become Cistercians because of Bernard's persuasion. So
mm.
yeah, there's usually layers to it. Um, yeah. So I mean, my strong sense is that both sexes have been slandered to a certain extent in modernity.
Yeah. Yeah. They tend to want to pigeonhole both men and women, I think, to be one way or another. And I spoke in the beginning of this stream about the pendulum swinging, about, women wanting to see girl bosses essentially because they felt helpless.
Right.
And it got increasingly more ridiculous in the movies, to the point where women are like, okay, that's enough. Could you just make it a little realistic now, please? And I don't think it's any different in any other topic, including spiritually, which is why I think you can go into a Catholic church and have women ushers and women extraordinary ministers and women choir masters and mistresses, and they're doing everything, and the men are sitting passively. The priest is sitting passively, letting them do everything because they're being active. But it has shooed all the men away, and now we're going to pretend that men aren't different. Well, just get with the program. You're a Catholic, aren't you? This is what we do now. It's not. It's stupid. Stop doing stupid things.
Right.
stop
No, I
stop
agree,
claiming there's no yeah. Stop claiming there's no difference between men and women.
because the
And I think
men's
right
we have
modernity wants us to say there isn't any difference, which yeah, I could go on a whole nother tangent about that, but I won't.
Centuries of example of what men's spirituality is like, and it's been squished.
Hmm.
Yeah. So,
Yes, toxic masculinity.
and instead of, this incredible spiritual tradition that both men and women were enriched by.
Hmm.
So, do you think we've persuaded the internet now?
Have we
Will they
persuaded?
leave us alone so we can carry on talking about the discarded image? Or,
Well, this is one of the images that has been discarded,
very good
so it's
point, right?
right in line. Yes.
Well, and this is, I mean, I see, I got in trouble with all my three cheers for white men and chivalry and things like that. And so, the Christian tradition has actually been pretty strong in supporting both sexes all along. And I
Yes.
mean, one way of doing this is we could have talked about how, the women are incredibly important in the Gospels, which you mentioned in some of
Yes.
our pre-show conversation. And in the
Hmm.
Middle Ages, they knew this, right? The first play, talking about drama, right? The first play is the Three Marys at the Tomb, in the
Oh.
sense that we have liturgical plays, or right, scripts that were probably performed on Easter. Of
Hmm.
the Marys go to the tomb and find it empty, and so the first witnesses to the resurrection are women, and the female saints throughout. The claim that women are denied in the Catholic Church is such a funny one, right? Because there's women saints everywhere, including Our Lady.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I don't find it funny. I find it a blatant modernist lie, and it ticks me off because it's willfully ignorant.
right, and it's also, I mean, the usually, as a medievalist, I am usually so intensely frustrated when the online arguments get at this, I mean, not even cartoon level of what our souls are like, and that you're,
Hmm.
arguing over, I'm not sure, it's distressing, right? Because if you just go into, in fact, what we know now, thanks to, for example, Bernie McGinn's great translation project of the classics of Western spirituality, you'll find all of this. It's all available and it's all out there, but somehow it's not reaching people's daily discussions. I'm not sure because it's not hidden anymore. It's all translated.
Yeah, well, people don't know what to look for, right? And that's why where you come in, you're so very helpful of just getting people to realize that there are these works out there that they maybe had never heard of before. So that's wonderful.
Well, I'm here to serve. Right. But this is, I mean, it's interesting because I keep narrating how I've been working on these texts and these questions and these stories and images for decades now. We've known them in my scholarship for decades. They weren't like completely out of the blue even in the 80s. People have been working on them for a good
Hmm.
century as scholars before that. But it's a wild, I've been trying to think about this as a problem of the internet. It's a wild feeling of thinking the only thing the internet ever knows is what happened today, right?
Hmm.
So whatever has gone viral and what we're all arguing about today, and yet we're also, as we've been talking about, in this period in which all of this knowledge and is available all everywhere through the
Yes.
internet all the time. So how can this is a sort of paradoxical problem of how can, on the one hand, we have access to the full richness of the tradition, and on the other, be erased by arguing over today's outrage. So,
Well, I mean, they call it rage bait for a reason.
indeed, indeed.
It's yeah, people always love gossip more than they love scholarship, but it is possible to indulge in both. Takes a little self discipline. People have to say, okay, I'm going to stop looking at this right now. I'm guilty too about this, and start reading these other things instead that I just find out because they sound really super cool. Now,
Well, it's
some
all
people,
available now, and if you want a nice place to start of a selection, this is Bernard McGinn, and the book is The Essential Writings of Christian Mysticism. He McGinn wrote a multi-volume study of Christian mysticism, which is why they asked him to do this selection. That it goes on and on and on and on, right? The portal that we've just opened for you to this tradition opens out into an enormous literature. It's way out there. Like with the discarded image, we're trying to show you the entire universe. This is another element of it. I picked the Rothschild Canticles to show us our pictures now because otherwise I'm trying to show you my entire archive.
Yeah.
Where shall I start? Oh, well, I'll just pick a book, right? A single book, which is simple. I mean, not even the tip of the iceberg of the enormous wealth of our spiritual tradition, and this is just the West. Imagine that there's more out there
Correct.
in the other tradition, the other tradition strands of our great tradition.
Hmm.
Well, okay. Any last words? The daydreamer. Yes, but then the internet is also everything everywhere all at once. Okay, yawn God, you're a troll tonight. Why are you ladies not using the real childbirth trump card? As women obviously be more spiritual than men, no matter how hard men LARP or try. Because we're smarter than that.
Yeah. And we're both mothers too, so meh.
Nah.
Notice we didn't use that once.
Well, and the women that were, whose examples we're using were not mothers either, right? They were nuns.
No, no, no. I
So
mean, there were some mystics who were, but yeah, you didn't use them as examples because
Bridget of Sweden
yeah.
definitely has those images.
Hmm.
So Christian spirituality is incarnate, and yes, we should probably talk about that more. And that's why it loves this particular form of erotic mysticism, because it's about the relationship of God with us as human beings, which the Song of Songs commentaries love meditating on, particularly at the moment of the Annunciation.
Hmm.
But I think we're not using that because that doesn't seem to be the that's not the claim we're making. Okay. Everywhere, everything, everywhere, all at once. We will not be here next week because we will be with each other in person at BaseCon. BaseCon will be live streamed, we hope. It usually is. Lots of great panels and discussions are going to be happening there. So check out the BaseCon Facebook, which is usually where Rob puts up the live stream. And in 2 weeks from now, we have the first of this year's. Well, actually, we had Hans as our very first guest for this season, but we have a new guest we've not talked to before, Robert Keim, who's coming on September 12th. And we will be continuing this season to be unpacking the discarded image, because you need to know all of the ways in which we could see the cosmos and ourselves in it. Yeah. Okay. Like, subscribe, tell your friends. Let's get this buzz going so that everybody knows that there's way more out there than just what happened yesterday.
Yes. Important.
Good night, everyone.